Is your cold making it hard for you to get to sleep and leading to a bad morning? Switch to Mucinex Night Shift for fast, powerful nighttime multi-symptom cold and flu relief. Mucinex Night Shift fights your worst nighttime symptoms to help you get to sleep and wake up ready to go. Mucinex Night Shift. It's comeback season. Use as directed.
Feel your max with Brooks Running and the all-new Ghost Max 2. They're the shoes you deserve, designed to streamline your stride and help protect your body. Treat yourself to feel-good landings on an ultra-high stack of super comfy nitrogen-infused cushion that takes the edge off every step, every day. The Brooks Ghost Max 2. You know, technically, they're a form of self-care. Brooks, let's run there. Head to brooksrunning.com to learn more.
Let's wrap our heads around that this adult teacher did this. And we're not going to go into details now, but we all know what's happening next. Yes, he used marijuana, wine, and porn. And for any 16-year-old, that's all quite stimulating. And it was just a lot of information, a lot of experience at once. And, he really knew how to push my buttons because he had a long history of manipulating teenage boys. Yes, I was just one of many.
Hello, welcome to another episode of Bunny Hugs and Mental Health, a free safe space for people to share and learn from others' experiences with mental health and addictions. I'm Todd Rennebaum, a suicide attempt survivor and a recovering substance abuser. Thank you so much for tuning in for another episode. This episode, I'm speaking with the incredibly sweet human being, Michael Caven, and boy, does he have a story to tell. Michael has been working on a memoir, and hopefully you can purchase that soon. I'm not sure when it's coming out, but his story is fascinating. Michael is a gay fella, and he is from the United States. He's now living in Vietnam, but his stories take place kind of the 70s, 80s, 90s. He talks about being sexually abused, going from rags to riches, and then becoming a bit of an LGBTQ plus icon in his city he was living in. And he's now in recovery of addictions. We don't really go into that too much. I mean, him and I did, but he really wants to focus on his story. So, yeah, stay tuned for all of that. And if you'd like to watch this episode on YouTube, please feel free to. Bunny Hugs and Mental Health. Please check out my new website, bunnyhugspodcast.com. It has all the links to everything I do and I'm kind of involved with, from public speaking to my children's book to my social medias to all that stuff. So please go on there. There's also a link to buy me a coffee. I'm not going to lie, and it's kind of embarrassing, and I hate doing this and saying this, but times are a bit tough for me right now. So if you are so kind enough to want to help support the podcast, then please feel free to buy me a coffee. You can also just rate, review, like, share the podcast or the videos and all that kind of stuff. So that'd be wonderful of you. But I digress. For now, without further ado, I give you Michael Caven.
Well, thank you. And yes, my story is all about resilience and never giving up. I am writing my memoir. My memoir is in development, yes. And I'm doing what any budding author and memoirist does, is getting my story out there. So I have a website, michaelcaven.com, and also a public Facebook page. And if you're watching and listening and you're interested in my story, please go to my public Facebook page and follow me, because I'm doing excerpts from my memoir, as well as videos from here in Vietnam, and just talking about this unique life I've had. And they say in memoir world that memoirs need to have three acts. And I tried 30 years ago to write my memoir, but at that time I only had 2 acts. And I certainly didn't have the maturity and the ability that I have now to tell my story. But these 3 acts chronicle my adventures, first in a gay bar empire in Dallas, Texas in the 1980s. And then it goes to me bringing down a predator teacher from my high school who manipulated and abused me when I was he groomed me when I was 15 and 16, came up with this, very ingenious way to manipulate me, which we can chat a little bit about later. Okay, that's the second act. And then the third, get ready, everybody, because I told you it's strange. I wound up co-founding the United States' first LGBT-themed restaurant in Columbus, Ohio, and that was in the 1990s. So those are the three stories, and there's a lot to unpack there. And why don't we start with Frank? When I met Frank, I was 20 years old. I was practically homeless. I was living on friends' couches. Yes, I was living in Tampa, Florida, but I wasn't raised in Tampa. I was raised in Long Island, but I made my way down to Tampa. I was destitute, and I had $20 and some change in my pocket, and I went to a gay bar on Kennedy Boulevard called the Old Plantation. And it was July 4th, 1983, yes, and sat at the bar, looked over, and there was this much older individual, yes, larger man, very large, bloated. If you've seen
a bear,
he was definitely a big bear, and a big
Gotcha.
teddy bear, so we began chatting, and I didn't know him from Adam, yes. But he seemed kind, and he could tell that I was struggling, that I was hungry, and everything. And he talked about his organization back in Texas. He mentioned that he had businesses and everything, and so we got to know each other. And I learned pretty quickly that he was Frank Caven, who was the very famous and successful gay bar owner in the 1970s and 80s. And in his career, which probably spanned 20 years, he developed about 60 different concepts, 60 bars. And back then, there was no internet, there were no computers. So, his managers would be stealing from him left and right. So he would just do annuities where he'd sell the business to the manager so he could at least get some money out of it. Because when you have so many clubs, that's really the only way that you can get your money is by selling it to the managers. And then they give you, your cut. So we kind of hit it off, yes. And a week later, there I was. I moved to Dallas, and I went from rags to riches very quickly, overnight. It was really startling to have such a change. But if we backtrack a little bit, how did I get there, and why would being in a relationship with Frank even be an option? Is that let's go back to the teacher. Now, I mentioned earlier that when I was 15 in high school, I was befriended by my English teacher, who was the speech teacher and also the drama coach at my high school on Long Island. And he could tell that I was vulnerable. We would chat during lunch periods when he was on hall duty, and I would talk about the chaos in my family life. There was a lot of chaos. A lot of rage from my stepfather, my mother. It was like War of the Roses. And there I was in the middle with our dog, with these two very angry people constantly beating on each other verbally and physically. So
were you an only child?
Yes, the only child. Yeah.
Gotcha.
Yep.
Okay.
And so he befriended me, and he seemed to care, and I would tell him my problems and my struggles, as all predators, as with all predators, he looked for my vulnerabilities, and I think he sensed that I might be gay. I wasn't at the time. I didn't really even know. I suspected that I was attracted to boys my own age, but I really was just trying to figure stuff out. It was an emerging sexuality, and I think he sensed that. And then he suggested the following year, after I'd taken his classes and he'd given me great marks, and with the lunchtime discussions when he was on hall duty, he suggested an away from school project at his house. Yes, and it would be a video project. And I was complimented. Wow, this teacher, we all loved him. We called him Doc Bateman, and he was adored by all of us. He was an amazing teacher, and especially when it came to theater. His goal was to help everyone to let their hair down. And indeed, he inspired all of us to be, wonderful little actors and actresses in his musicals and in his dramas that he would produce at our high school. So he suggested this project, and but it needed to be a secret. Didn't want to make anybody jealous. So, went to his house. He picked me up at school one Saturday, went to his house, and he came up with this scenario for this video project where, I play someone my own age, and his scenario that he laid out is that, okay, you've been outed at school. People know that you're homosexual. People know you're gay. You've been outed, and you return home with shame and embarrassment. You look in the mirror and you want to kill yourself, and you make the decision to kill yourself. And he said, please take off your clothes, get into the bathtub. If you put tea leaves on your wrist and you put it in the water, it looks like blood is coming out. So we did that. Now just think about this, everybody. This is a adult teacher, yes, who is suggesting to a student that he suspects might be gay, that a solution to your problem is killing yourself. Yes, but you see, that was the mindset back in the 50s and the 60s. Any movies, anything to do with gay people, homosexuals, it was always a bad outcome. Yes, homosexuals were always killing themselves, or they're murderers or whatever. That's how it was in the 50s and 60s in movies, yes? But just let's wrap our heads around that this adult teacher did this, yes? And we're not going to go into details now, but we all know what's happening next. Yes, he used marijuana, wine, and porn. And for any 16-year-old, that's all quite stimulating. Yes. And it was just a lot of information, a lot of experience at once. And, he really knew how to push my buttons because he had a long history of manipulating teenage boys. Yes, I was just one of many that he manipulated.
Oh, okay, I was going to ask.
Yeah, he was a serial offender. His dissertation was a celebration, a play about adult male teachers seducing their male students. And my high school either never read his dissertation or didn't care because they hired that man, and they should not have ever hired him if they had done their research. But this was the 1970s and 80s, and things were different back then. So, with the cannabis and the porn and the alcohol and then the poppers, one thing led to another. We know where that's going, yes. And then also what he manipulated out of me was taking explicit Polaroids of me that were sexually explicit, yes, which captured the moment. And again, that's part of his drill as a predator. That's what he does with his victims. And I wanted to please him. Well, let's just be clear here, okay? I was a vulnerable 16-year-old, and this man was giving me all this attention that I was so needy for. And finally, someone who maybe could explain my emerging sexuality. I had so many questions about my emerging gayness that I had no one to talk to about. There were no organizations back then. And, if my lacrosse buddies, I played lacrosse in junior high school and high school, if they knew I was gay, they would have killed me. Okay, so there was no one to talk to. And he knew that. He knew he had me. And I wanted to please him. And really, to a certain extent, I did fall for him. But how could I not? Yes, how could I not? I was a kid. I was a vulnerable kid. And I did kind of fall in love with him. And I envisioned us having a life together, which is bonkers, but, totally unfeasible and unrealistic. And in fact, a few weeks later, after a few more experiences, yes, he dropped me. He basically said, okay, we can't do this anymore. And he encouraged me to meet people my own age. But he was done, which again is typical of predators. When they're done, they're done. When they get what they want, they're done. And he was done. And so
that must have been not just, you had emotions for this man too. So that's extra hard. I mean, any kind of breakup is tough, let alone one that's so confusing, like a predator victim relationship. So I'm guessing your heart was broken, but also just so messed up.
It was messed up.
I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry you had to go through this.
Oh, thank you.
Because it's gross that someone would do that to you.
I agree, and thank you for your compassion. I appreciate that. It is gross and disgusting, but it happened, and I was in denial. I did not know that what this man did was so egregious. I thought he was my friend.
Yeah.
I thought he was my friend. Now, the following year, he wound up getting laid off, not for any misconduct, just money, and he wound up going to Phillips Exeter Academy and served as their drama head. And we stayed in contact. We stayed in contact for a number of years, letters and an occasional phone call. But I was off to the races. Now, let's be clear that the message that he gave me with his seduction and manipulation was, your worth, Michael, is as a sexual object. That's the message I got. Now, we're not going to spend a lot of time on my family today, but that's also the message I got from male and female caregivers. Yes, I was a cute kid, and a number of them took advantage of me in different ways, overtly and covertly. So with that and with the teacher, I had the message, you're a sexual object, baby. That's your worth. That's what you're all about. And I lived on Long Island. I discovered Manhattan. I discovered that young, hot things like me on the East Side, sashaying around at these hustler bars, can get lots of attention. Older, wealthier gentlemen bought me dinners and would buy me clothes, and I loved the attention. I loved it. And drugs, oh please, if you had blow, and blow is a term for cocaine, I was your friend, okay? Because again, I was born an alcoholic, okay? Alcoholism and addiction goes back on both sides of my family for generations, okay? The first time I had a drink, I was home. This is where I need to be because I'm an alcoholic. I was born an alcoholic. After Larry Lane Bateman, my teacher, did his thing, I was off to the races. I discovered the East Side of Manhattan. I discovered that I could get lots of attention. I felt that I was not a money boy or an escort because I wasn't doing it for money. I was doing it for attention and gifts and kindness and approval and adulation. Yes, and I loved being adored. And, back then, we didn't have OnlyFans. We had the streets. We had we had payphones. We had bars. Bars is where you met people. Yes, back in the day, and made contact.
I met my wife.
That's right. So that's what we had back then. But eventually my time in Manhattan kind of wore out. Things at home on Long Island wore out, and I wound up moving down to Florida. And eventually, a year or two later, I would meet Frank. And begin that journey in his gay bar empire. And, there was... So
were you dating Frank? Or was it a
Well, it was a sexual
mentor?
Relationship. No. It was definitely...
Gotcha. Okay.
It was a sexual relationship. His nickname for the bed was the workbench, and as RuPaul would say, you better work, and I got to work. And there was a lot of work involved, okay? This was a 60-year-old man. I'm 20. Yeah, there was a lot of work involved.
Wait. He was 60.
60. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Gotcha.
So that night in that bar that I told you about, the old plantation, I looked over and he kind of looked like my grandfather. I don't know if that's good or bad, but, he did, we did have a connection. We talked, but definitely intimacy was part of that equation. And after a drunken oblivion Chinese dinner, we were back on the workbench at his condo in Tampa. And then a week later, I was in Dallas on his arm. Yes. And whenever we would go into his bars, okay, there'd be a parting of the waves. Yes. And there I am on Frank's arm. He's 60. I'm 20. I'm just a hot little thing. Yeah. A hot mess. Yeah. And people would laugh. They would make faces at me, snicker, whore, hustler. It was just nasty. Let me tell you, Dallas queens are the most vicious, I think, in the world. And I became a vicious Dallas queen myself. Okay, and any queens in Dallas would laugh if they hear this because it's so fucking true. We're just the most vicious motherfuckers on the planet. I mean, really. So I would get these, the judgment and the shame. And it was, it was easy for them to hate me and very difficult for me not to hate myself, but I was doing the best I could. Now, yes, did I need to engage with Frank on July 4th, 1983? Why didn't I just get a job working as a server in a restaurant or a busser or any type of job that I could get instead of making that choice? Well, I wasn't wired that way. My parents had bonkers expectations for me, and my mother especially. Okay, but yes, I made that choice as an adult. Okay, because I did the best I could with what I knew how to do at the time. And Frank and I, we lifted each other up. He had just gotten out of a relationship with Dennis. Okay, so Dennis was always lurking around. Dennis was always lurking around, and and he was when Frank and I decided we wanted to kind of legalize our relationship. And back then there was no gay marriage. Gay male and gay female adults would sometimes adopt each other legally as adults, which is and was legal, as a way to at least have a legal recognition that you're connected. So in 1984,
Gotcha.
The following year, Frank would adopt me.
I have a question. How old was Dennis?
Dennis was, I was 20. Dennis was probably 24, 25. Yeah.
Oh, okay. So you guys are similar age.
Yeah, it was
Gotcha.
similar
Okay.
age. Yeah. Yeah, Frank discovered me at the bar in the old plantation. A few years earlier, Frank, he had a bar in Dallas called the Frat Club, the Fraternity Club. And they would have wet jockey short contests at this club. And there would be Frank. And, you got to picture Frank. And I love
Pit
it.
Crew.
Oh, that's right. Well, he was a one-man show. He was a one-man show, and he had his plastic water bottle, and he'd be spraying the contestants, because it's an underwear. It's a wet jockey short contest. So he'd be up there spraying, but looking for his next number one. And we were number ones. If you were in Frank's world, if you were his lover, you were number one. You were a number one. So Dennis was a number one, yes, but they parted ways. But the deal with Frank is that for the young men that were in Frank's life, they could expect a few things. They could expect a car, and then later on a bar, yes, to manage and eventually own. And that was Dennis's route, car, bar, and he was running some of Frank's clubs. But I was really the first young man in Frank's life who wasn't really interested in that stuff. I wanted an education. And so, in a few months later, I enrolled at SMU, Southern Methodist University in Dallas, also known as Send Money Urgently, because it was so expensive. And I started an education. So my route was different. But also, as Frank's son, I would become his heir. Yes, and I wanted to be the son. I wanted to be the heir. But I had no business capacity. I didn't understand anything about the bar business. But I went to school, and Frank was very supportive. Yes, and for a year we rolled along, and then eventually I bottomed out. Frank was traveling, and I had lots of money for drugs and for people and for all kinds of situations. And I'd eventually bottom out and wake up in a treatment center in Dallas at the time in 1984 called Raleigh Hills. And Frank supported me through that treatment. And the drug counselor said, I've listened to your story, and I think the only way you and Frank could make it is if you move out of the penthouse in the sky, move into the dorm at school, and you guys have a father-son relationship without benefits, and transition into a real father-son relationship. And Frank came to treatment, and we did family counseling, and we agreed that would be the best. That would be the best next steps for us. Dennis, who's lurking in the background, he's like, okay, I got an opening, and he moved back into Frank's condo. And then for the upcoming years, we all did this dance of always trying to get Frank's attention. And it was a big gay soap opera. And I write in detail about this gay soap opera that I was involved with all of these very, very big characters. And, at the end of the day, I was just way over my head. And, they were in it to win it, and I don't know what I wanted, but, it wasn't a clear intention. And I was just too much of a hot mess to really be able to be effective. I would eventually run one of Frank's bars in Washington, D.C. I took a year off from school to do that. We had been going to Washington quite a bit. Frank was a big Republican supporter, gay Republican, back long before log cabin Republicans and all of that stuff. He was always a Republican, and he became a major donor. We met then President Reagan, Vice President Bush, and lots of other luminaries. We went to the White House a few times. It's hard to believe, but it's true. A year earlier I was destitute in Florida, and now I'm at the fucking White House. Wow. Talk about a change, a radical change, pretty remarkable. But then
one question: was the gay bar in Washington called the Lincoln Monument?
No, it was the Lincoln Monument. I'm sure that there's a lot of cruising. I would go to the Lincoln Monument and the Washington Monument frequently. I lived there.
Wait,
Washington.
What's the big pointy one?
The Washington.
Oh, I meant Washington. That joke was ruined.
That's okay. It's okay.
Because it's so phallic. Anyway.
It is. And there's a lot of cruising that goes on there. And I would go to those monuments just to clear my head and everything. And they are quite beautiful. But yes, no, the name of the bar was JR's. And JR's, of all of Frank's brands, was probably his most successful brand. And it's an S&M bar, but S&M stands for stand and model. Because there was a lot of standing and modeling going on. And back in the day, there was no social media. So if you wanted to get laid, you had to go to the bar to meet somebody. And, this whole social media thing would have driven a stake through Frank's heart. Because, much of his success was the fact that gay men needed a place to go to meet people. And the only place really to meet others like yourself was at the gay bars. So there was JR's. I ran JR's in Washington for a year. While I was there, he had a stroke and became somewhat incapacitated. Dennis was right there. And, Dennis became the savior and Dennis became the heir apparent. Frank would die the following year. And I have to say that for all that Frank did for me, one of the best things he did was to not include me in the succession of his bars.
Introducing the timely children's book, Sometimes Daddy Cries. The visually stunning book is told through the eyes of a boy whose father suffers from depression. He sees his dad get sad, rest, and even go to the hospital, all while comparing his father's depression to a physical ailment. Sometimes Daddy Cries is getting rave reviews from parents and mental health professionals alike. One critic has stated, "This is a timely and important book that will help countless fathers and sons broach the subject of depression." An Amazon customer commented, "An excellent book to open up a conversation with a young child about depression in a parent. Sometimes Daddy Cries is available in hardcover and paperback on Amazon.ca and Amazon.com.
Prep for Thanksgiving at Whole Foods Market. Save now on no antibiotics ever frozen whole turkey, just $1.49 a pound with Prime. Sales on brie and select seafood appetizers help get things started. For sides, go with wallet-happy favorites from 365 by Whole Foods Market. And finish with decadent desserts from the bakery. Or get your whole spread catered. Just order early. Get Thanksgiving ready at Whole Foods Market. Terms apply.
How about some fresh out of the oven gingerbread, bright snowdrop, fresh Iowa pine, and cool peppermint to put you in the holiday cleaning spirit? Made with goodness, not a lot of nonsense. Mrs. Meyer's. See what good can grow. Visit mrsmeyers.com today.
This episode is brought to you by Etsy.
Oh.
Hear that?
Okay. Thank you.
Etsy knows these aren't the sounds of holiday gifting. Well, not the ones you're hoping for. You want squeals of delight. Happy tears.
How did you?
And spontaneously written songs of joy.
I am so happy. Oh yeah, oh yeah, oh yeah.
Okay, the song needs a bit of work, but anyway, to get those reactions, make sure everyone on your list feels heard with handmade, handpicked, and designed gifts from small shops on Etsy. Gifts like personalized jewelry, custom artwork, cozy style items, vintage pieces, and home decor to celebrate all of your favorite people and their specific kind of special. For original gifts that say, I get you, Etsy has it.
Because if I had gotten my hands on any kind of money back then, big money, I would not be talking to you right now, and I would not have made it. So that was the final gift he gave me, was by not giving me that. And I would have missed this great life ahead. So even for that, I'm grateful, because any type of money back then would have killed me. So here we are. I got a job out of school at Neiman Marcus in their buyer development program, and then eventually I'd make it to Columbus, Ohio. And I was struggling. I had, a lot of bipolar. I was on kind of meds, lots of different meds. I struggled a lot back then. And then one day...
So you were diagnosed? Mm-hmm. You were diagnosed bipolar?
Yeah. And
Gotcha.
Back then,
okay.
there were not the medications that there are now. It was all,
right.
lithium, stuff that just knocked you out. And but one day, I was working at Neiman's, and I got a package in the mail. And the package was... a video cassette and Polaroids. Those Polaroids that my teacher had taken of me 10 years earlier in that secret away from school video project, right? And he sent them to me. And I remember looking, going, wow, look at, who is this boy? Look at his eyes. I mean, I looked so out of it, just in a daze. And I'm thinking, is he happy? Is he proud of himself with what he's doing? I asked myself these questions when I looked at this. And obviously, the teacher had no concern whatsoever that I would realize what he did. He felt that he had indoctrinated me so firmly and completely that he could send me these Polaroids and that it wouldn't affect me, that I'd see it as a good thing. Yes, because for years I had bought into that it was a good thing. It was okay, what he did. And and then the video had a mix of all kinds of pornography and everything. And I was like overwhelmed. And then he began sending more big packages of multi-cassettes as well as picture books. And I was really uncomfortable with some of the stuff that he was sending. I was uncomfortable with the kid porn that he was sending. I said to him, I said, please don't send that. If you're going to send me porn, just send the adult. Don't send me that stuff. Yes, but it began to get things going in my mind that something is not right. Something was not right in this situation. And then a few months later, I bottomed out yet again. But thankfully, at that time, I finally had enough money for therapy, and I could pay the copay, and I began therapy. Yes, and unbeknownst to me, my counselor wound up turning out to be one of the biggest advocates for male survivors and experts and an author and all of that. His name is Howard Fradkin. But I didn't know that, and we began work, and the first few sessions was just a lot of history and a lot of, just trying to get him up to speed on what's happened. He was really the first gay male authority figure in my life that didn't put the moves on me. Yes. And that was meaningful. And maybe it was the third or fourth session, and I'm sitting there looking at him, and it was like the ceiling flipped off and this light just shined down on me, and I was blinded by the realization, oh my God, he was not my friend. He took advantage of me. And Howard didn't prompt that. It just finally came, what had happened. And the tears flowed. Yes, and the anger at the realization that he was not my friend and what he did was egregious. It was a terrible, terrible thing that he did to me, and that I bought into it, and how I felt about myself and seeing myself as a sexual object. It was a revelation. I felt like, the roof had come up, and I was just flooded with white light and realization and pain, but also a sense of, now I understand. Now I understand what happened. Yes. And from there, my life changed. Yes. And from there, I learned what empowerment is, real empowerment. Not the temporary empowerment of getting laid, having sex, doing drugs. There's a level of empowerment that comes with that. It's temporary and it's an illusion. Yes. But it's, in the end, it's self-destructive. So I began to learn.
What year was that?
This was in 1990.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay.
1990 ish. Yeah. And so I guess in 1990 I was about 26, 27 years old. So this realization of what had happened, just overcame me, and but it was the beginning of a new life, and soon enough my depression began to lift because I wasn't pushing down my anger and my shame, and I began therapy, and I also met the Tom, who became the love of my life at that time. And, 6 months later, I realized, in talking with Tom and talking with my therapist, wow, I have this motherload of pornography. What am I going to do with this stuff? What should I do? I could go to the dumpster and throw it all out and be done with it. Yes. Or I could, turn him in to the authorities. And I secured the services of a local family attorney who's also an LGBT activist. I explained everything to her, and she said, well, what do you want? I said, well, I don't want him to do to other boys what he's done to me. And she said, okay, well, here's how. And, she explained that, we would need to get an immunity so that I could be protected, and then contact the authorities and begin that whole process. And that's what we did. And it took a couple of months and a few trips out to New Hampshire. I testified before grand juries and all of that stuff. I got the immunity. And eventually his Phillips Exeter campus apartment was raided. They found lots of pornography, lots of evidence of him perpetrating other boys on campus in different ways. And his case eventually went to the federal level. I wound up testifying, yes, and other students testified as well. He was convicted on all counts, even though his attorney begged the jury to at least acquit him on one count to affect my credibility or to make a statement about my credibility. But the jury was very clear. We believe Michael Caven, and we do not believe this teacher, and we're not going to give him any breaks. Yes, and he was found guilty, and he went to jail for 5 years, and he was, most importantly, removed from the education system. Now, let's be clear. Child porn is bad, okay? But this whole thing was a vehicle for him to be held accountable for what he did to me when I was 16, because the law of limitations had already run out. There was no way that he could be held accountable for that. So this was the vehicle for which that could happen. And I knew that it would mean public exposure on my part. That was what my attorney said. You're going to have to disclose everything to the authorities, so there's no surprises. Everything about Frank, everything about your alcoholism, drug addiction these years, and the whole shebang, so there's no surprises. And I did. There were no surprises. The sleazy defense attorney waved around those Polaroids in the courtroom,
Jesus.
To try to, rile me up. It didn't work, yes. But let's be clear, he was found guilty for sending me the Polaroids that he took of me when he created those Polaroids, which are child pornography of me when I was 16. That he was found guilty for that. And that's pretty ironic, or poetic, I guess. I don't know. So there we are, he's out of the education system, and I'm embarking on a new life. Yes. And the day after his sentencing, I began a master's program in clinical counseling, and social work, and community mental health counseling. I got a master's over a 1.5 year period. I started working in community mental health. I was able to let the trial go and let all of that go and move on with a new life. And then, my grandmother in Richmond Hill, Queens, she passed away, and she left me some money. And it gave my then partner, Tom, and I the opportunity to envision doing a business. And we envisioned doing a business in Columbus, Ohio that would try to make a difference. And back then, any gay business, whether it was a gay restaurant, gay bar, it was always in the shadows. No windows, no exposure to the real world, no natural light coming in. And we wanted to change that. And back then, theme restaurants were very popular. Planet Hollywood, Hard Rock Cafe, all of those. And so we said, well, what about doing a restaurant that celebrates gay and lesbian, transgender history and culture, like a Planet Hollywood? Yes. So we came up with this vision, and we developed this restaurant that not only had great food, but the most amazing design. We had an Elton John costume, Liberace. We had big murals talking about the movement, a famous 50 murals of 50 people who've made a difference over these thousands of years that were gay or lesbian or bi or trans. And we had shadow box tables with vitrines with different parts of the story. It was really beautiful. We won design awards, and we were this little restaurant in the Midwest that could and did. And we had lots of celebrity visitors. Ellen DeGeneres' mother, Betty, who was an activist back then on behalf of her daughter, who was traveled all over the country, she would come visit us once a year. And she'd say, someday I'm going to bring Ellen. Someday I'm going to. And we're like, yes, bring Ellen. We would love for you to bring Ellen. And eventually it was Betty's 70th birthday. They were in town. Ellen was doing a show at the Palace Theater, and they wound up coming for dinner, the whole posse. And things like that happened that were really remarkable. But let's just be clear, our little restaurant also served many, many solo acts who became part of our fabric and became part of our extended family. And they were as important, if not more important, than our celebrity guests. So we had a big diversity of clientele. Some of our patrons, interestingly enough, would be heterosexuals who were having affairs. who felt like they wouldn't be identified if they came to our restaurant. I know, isn't it? Yeah.
So it was heterosexual people would come and have heterosexual affairs.
If they were having an affair.
They knew no one.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so if they were having an affair, they'd come to our restaurant to have a nice, romantic, quiet, secretive, discreet dinner because they felt confident that nobody would recognize them. Yes, it was a great adventure. And out on Maine, in many ways was my redemption. Yes, I was so distressed at some of the publicity that came out of my teacher's trial. There was a national magazine that did a very sympathetic portrayal of him, which was really very disgusting. And
why?
I know. Oh, it's a long story. It's not even worth talking about. But it was just,
his PR people.
Well, no, actually, his advocates. These sex offenders, they have advocates. They have apologists. They have allies who minimize, who try to explain away. Who when I say minimize, they say, it wasn't really abuse. They minimize it. So he had plenty of advocates.
It's like gaslighting.
Gaslighting. And the magazine, I'll tell you, the magazine's name is Vanity Fair. And it was like this whitewash of him, this sympathetic portrayal, and they portrayed me as the dastardly hustler. And I think that they must have looked at his video project as something avant-garde, these sick motherfuckers. They must have looked at that as avant-garde, okay? Because I can't understand how they, could have written what they wrote if they didn't, have some level of admiration for his, perverted video project. So yeah, it was unfortunate, and I was distressed at that because they would tie in homosexuality and pedophilia, and they were tying in.
Right.
So out on Maine, I felt like we had such great press, and I feel like it erased or at least addressed the negative publicity that came from my teacher's trial. So those
sounds like a really cool, safe space.
It was a cool, safe space, and we had a banquet room upstairs where we would have weddings, heterosexual weddings, same-sex weddings, all kinds of fundraisers, but yes, a safe place where LGBT people could go and hold hands and be safe and comfortable. And we called our heterosexual allies hip heteros. Our hip heteros. And over the years, we got more and more hip heteros to come and support the restaurant and see what we have created. Frequently, when I'd be talking to the husband and wife, the husband would say, "Oh, it's so comfortable here." Well, what did you expect, buddy? What did you think we were doing all these years? That you didn't come to the restaurant, because you felt you might be uncomfortable. But hey,
who's expecting JRs? Maybe,
maybe he was, yes, or perhaps secretly, hoping for it. But in any case, But we had great allies, the hip heteros, and this amazing experience, and so that impacted people's lives. And Tom and I took a lot of satisfaction and gratitude that we were the it couple. So when young people would see stories about Tom and me, the stories weren't about suicide. They weren't about bad homosexual endings. It was a happy story about a gay couple making a difference, a gay restaurant where you can be empowered, yes, and be comfortable and feel safe. Those are wonderful things, and we took a lot of happiness that young people would see this and see that, yes, you can have a happy story if you're gay, lesbian, bisexual, or trans, or questioning. So, we took a lot of satisfaction from that.
Ah, that's amazing.
Thanks.
So how did you go from there to Vietnam?
Wow. Well, it's interesting. My memoir in development actually ends 22 years ago. So a lot has happened in 22 years. Yeah. There is a book too. And I do have about 16,000 words for the 22 years from the end of the memoir to now. And that may be developed later. But the book one, which is at 50,000 words now, those are the real stories. That's what people want to read about. I'm not sure they're going to be so interested in the last 22 years. I wound up moving to Philadelphia. I had a successful real estate career. And then in 2015, I was kind of fed up with the whole thing. I had an unhappy relationship, not Tom, after Tom. And I just wanted to retire over here on the other side of the world, somewhere where I could afford to semi-retire. And I began my journey in August of 2015, Australia, then look at the map, okay, Indonesia. And I looked at the map and I'm like, okay, Vietnam, let's see what's going on in Vietnam. And I thought I'd spend, a month or two here. Honestly, I didn't even think I would be welcome as an American. I mean, I didn't know about the relationship between the two countries. I didn't know that it had normalized, but I learned pretty quickly. But what I also learned in my travels here in Vietnam, and in my first year, I traveled all over. I just had a suitcase, lived in Airbnbs, lived with families, mostly families, yes. And I learned so much about the Vietnamese culture. The people were so kind and so welcoming. And it was just an eye-opener for me. And as I traveled around this amazing country, it's so beautiful, whether the north or the north, Sapa, the Sapa Mountains, whether in the south, the Mekong Delta, or here in central Vietnam, which has amazing natural beauty, yes, only exceeded by the beauty of the people and the culture and the kindness. So I was like, wow. And when I arrived in Da Nang in early 2016, I'm like, oh my gosh, mountains, beaches, this has everything I've been looking for. And my Airbnb family that morning said, what are you looking for? And I said, I think this is what I'm looking for. So I did leave and go to other places, Cambodia, Laos, Thailand, India, and South America. But then in 2017, I came back. Da Nang had made such an impact on me, and I decided to build a life. And that was 7 years ago. And as is the case with many expats, I was teaching. I began teaching, and because of my long business background, yes, in retail management, as well as a restaurant owner and in real estate in Philadelphia, I'm more than just an English teacher. I'm a business communication specialist, business English, and presentation skills. And I'm with a local university, and they've expanded my role a lot. And so that's what I do here. And but I still have downtime to go to the beach and go to the mountains. And I'm so grateful to Vietnam and for the life that I'm able to have here. It's been remarkable and totally unexpected. And Da Nang is such a beautiful city. I encourage your listeners to check us out. Google us, and you'll see that there's just so much beauty here. But there's enough of an infrastructure, and there's enough of an education system where I could build a life here, but still have a lot of the natural beauty.
I do have one question that I have a few older friends that are gay, and it always fascinates me, or I use that word too much. I wonder what it was like, because you were going through such struggles and all this incredible Hollywood kind of movie you're going through, but also that's at the same time there's also the AIDS epidemic going through, and so you're also like, I mean, that must have been scary too, and losing friends and people, and trying to navigate that as well.
It was,
and worrying whether you had it or you're going to get it, or
yeah, absolutely. It's what got Dennis in the end. My nemesis. And back in the early 80s, when Frank and I met, it was just, I remember reading on Long Island about GRID, gay-related immunity deficiency. I remember reading about that in the 1981, 82. But then in 1983, when Rock Hudson died, or 1984, I think he died, in the gay community, we all changed our behavior, and we all shifted to safer or safe sex. Frank and I talked a lot about it. We were losing friends in Dallas. I had a professor at school. He was teaching on Thursday. The following week, he was gone, very fast. And everyone was shaking their head going, what is happening here? But we learned pretty quickly to change our behavior, and we did. But many, many friends lost, and it was tragic. And how I missed it, I don't know. I really don't know, because I don't have HIV or AIDS, and you would think that I would, considering how active I was in the early 80s in Manhattan. It's remarkable. And of course I'm grateful, but, I do miss my friends, and I have a long list of friends and acquaintances that I've lost over the years. So yes.
Did you ever have a survivor's guilt?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. Interesting.
Yeah. And I don't talk about it because it seems so, I don't want to sound trite or cliche about survivor's guilt, but the reality is that it is bizarre to have survived something when so many others did not. And you do ask yourself, why me? How did I survive this when so many of my friends didn't? And, there's no answer to it. There's really no answer. Although I'm not religious or spiritual, I do have a sense that there has been a guiding force and that there has been somebody or something or some power watching over me and guiding me. I do have that sense, and I don't mean it in a narcissistic way. It's just sometimes It just seems so unbelievable that I can still be here, and I don't know how or why, other than it was just some guiding force that saw me through to get to this point. I do feel like I do believe that my story needs to be told. And when I was drafting and working, and I've been working with coaches, and I've had an editor, with my memoir. And as I get into it, and as my skill sets over these past year and a half that I've been writing have developed, and I've learned tricks of the trade of the memoir, I feel like not only is my story interesting and compelling, I found an entertaining way to talk about it and to travel from these different worlds. And my readers have been very enthusiastic. Now, look, this is not high literature. This is not Paul Monet or any of these fabulous memoirists, but I can tell a fucking story, and it's entertaining, and it moves along, and there's lots of surprises and lots of, oh my God, and lots of things people will learn about subcultures that you never had any idea of. So I mean, and they say in memoir world, when you get to the point where it is simply non-negotiable, you must tell your story. You've gotten to the point where you must tell your story. It must be told. That's where I got to, where it is simply non-negotiable. And I do wonder about university. They've never asked me about my past. I know that they know because they have my full legal name. And if you know where to go on the internet, you can read all about Bateman's trial and all of that. But they never have said anything. And they see me as an exceptional lecturer and deeply committed to my students and adored by my students and colleagues. But, I do wonder now that I'm coming out and now that I have a public social media, I do wonder what they're going to think. I just don't know. But I'm at the point now where my story must be told, irregardless of any consequences or irregardless of what I may lose in the process. What I'm gaining is so valuable. Yes, insofar as, just being able to put it out there, having pictures of me and Frank, I never thought that I would ever publicize any of that, but there it is on my website, michaelcaven.com, and my other adventures. So even in the last few months of doing this, I have walked through a lot of shame, residual shame. You would think after all these years of male survivor work and counseling that I would have been through with the shame, but I still have shame. And I look at the picture, and if you look at my website or my Facebook page, you'll see the 3 stories. And I look at that and I go, is that bad? Is that bad? When I look at that, I see a young man who co-founded a visionary LGBT-themed restaurant. I see a young man that took down a predator. Yes. I see a young man who at 20 didn't have any options and hooked up with a much older, wealthier man so I could invent myself and go to school and get an education. So is there anything bad in that? I had to ask myself, is there anything bad in that? And there isn't. It's just a lot of strength, perseverance, resilience, and never giving up. Never give up. And that's my message to everybody today. Never give up. Just carry on and do your best. And in the end, love yourself and forgive yourself. And years ago, I did not think I could forgive myself for all of it. I did not think I could. But, now I'm very, for me, forgiveness is a process and self-forgiveness is a process. And I have made a lot of progress. I'm so grateful. So grateful. And I'm so grateful to be able to share this with you. And, Todd, you're a great man and your story is so inspiring. You help so many people. You put it out there. Look at your open mind. You have an open mind and an open heart to people like me who are different, And you're just
not that different.
You're just, I know. Of course, we share the same themes of resilience, but the fact that you have an open mind and an open heart helps your listeners and your viewers to have an open mind and an open heart. So I just want to thank you for your advocacy for humanity and for all of us being more comfortable in our skin.
Thank you so much. It's not too often I get emotional on here. Thank you so much, Michael. Please make sure to follow all his social media stuff, and I'll put the links in the show notes. And then, he'll update everybody as to when his memoir is coming out, so that would be fantastic. Thank you again, Michael. You are just an incredibly sweet human, so thank you so much for reaching out. And thank you, everybody, for listening. Please stay tuned for next week. I have so many incredible guests and interviews lined up here. I just can't wait to share them all, actually, to be honest with you. I'd love to just dump them all out right now and you can all binge, but that's not really how it works. So stay tuned for next week, where there will be yet another incredible guest with yet another incredible story and some inspiration and wisdom. Until then, please remember to make your beds and take your meds. Bye.